Fill your thirst beside the river. Wash the journey from your hands. Feel the comfort flow inside you. Come this far, you understand.
Hi, welcome to Healing Outside the Box. I'm Rosemary Lachance, an energy healer, spiritual teacher, and psychotherapist.
Hi, and I'm Dina Scungio, a student and teacher of spirituality.
And we are co-hosts for this thought-provoking series and are dedicated to providing you with food for thought information and answers to all modalities of alternative healing, spiritual development, animal welfare, environmental concerns, and so much more in the form of guest speakers who are experts in their fields. This series is recorded and will be shown in your area on your local public service cable network. Please contact them for dates and times.
If you have a group that you think would be interested in what we have to offer, we are available to come and teach. We will give you our contact information at the end of the show. Please visit Rosemary's website and click on My TV Show, where you will find a wealth of information. That's rosemarylachance.com. Our shows are now available for you to watch free on YouTube. Just go to YouTube and type in Healing Outside the Box to make your choice, and we are constantly adding new shows, so keep checking back all the time. We're also on Facebook under Healing Outside the Box, and if you go there and like our page, you'll get notifications on new things that we post about the show. So please enjoy the show.
Okay. Well, this is our show number 191. And we have with us tonight Dr. James Sensenig, naturopathic doctor in Hamden, Connecticut. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, my pleasure.
Welcome, Dr. Sensenig.
We always love having Dr. Sensenig on the show. I'm going to give you a little bio on him, okay? Dr. Sensenig has been practicing naturopathic medicine for nearly 40 years and is well known for helping thousands of people regain their health. Dr. Sensenig sees patients with complaints of all kinds and is particularly interested in the treatment of digestive diseases, headaches and migraines, joint and muscle complaints, and chronic fatigue. He also sees children with health problems ranging from asthma and eczema to developmental delays and autism. Dr. Sensenig graduated from the National College of Naturopathic Medicine in Portland, Oregon, where he later served as Dean of Education. He was the founding president of the American Association of Naturopathic Physicians, the chairman of its Government Affairs Committee for a decade, and the founding dean of the College of Naturopathic Medicine at the University of Bridgeport, Connecticut. Dr. Sensenig has consulted for a number of government agencies, insurance companies, colleges, and natural products companies. He is on the faculty of the Southwest College of Naturopathic Medicine in Tempe, Arizona, and the University of Bridgeport College of Naturopathic Medicine. Okay, tonight's show is titled Food Tolerance, Allergy, and Hypersensitivity. So, I guess the first question we're going to ask you tonight is, what is causing all these problems?
Oh, what problems? The problem with the food?
Yeah, the allergies. Let's start one thing at a time. Let's start with food allergy. What do you think is causing that?
Well, may I back up one step further?
Sure.
And such as I had somebody in the office a couple of weeks ago who came in with a complaint of rheumatoid arthritis. That was a diagnosis.
Okay.
We made some changes, minor changes, one of which was to change her diet. Her symptoms improved dramatically within a couple of weeks. And the first thing that she said when she came back in, before we even kind of said hello to each other, is she said, "Who knew?" And I said, "Who knew what?" She said, "Who knew that foods could be so important?"
Wow.
And I thought on the one hand, well, that's sort of a stupid question. I mean, can you name one function in your body, one cell in your body that's not affected by what you put in your mouth? I mean, every cell depends on what you eat or drink. And yet, it's a very understandable question. Who knew? because we're led to believe in this culture that you can eat anything you want, whenever you want, wherever you want, however you want, and it all goes to the same place. You've heard that before, right? And it doesn't really matter what you put in your mouth or put in your body. And of course, there's the old analogy of food being analogous to fuel in a car, you know, and you hear people say, well, you take better care of what you put in your car than what you put in your body. But it goes way, way beyond that. Foods can affect us in a number of ways. And so what's responsible for all of it? Changes in our physiology secondary to or because of drugs, like side effects of drugs. We can get into that in more detail. Changes in the food itself.
Yes.
Especially these days with all the additives and toxins and hormones and antibiotics and other drugs that are in the
GMOs
food. And I'm not sure we even know what all's in there.
Right.
I guess it wouldn't surprise me to learn that there's a whole lot more than what we think. And then we have genetically modified organisms, which we're told are safe.
Yeah, right.
And, well, you know, if I was going to be completely honest and objective about it, I could say, well, maybe they are. But where's the evidence? There's not been a long enough study. And in the studies that have been done, it's a pretty scary subject. So, and that's true of a lot of things that are in foods. So, probably, well, let me give you another example before we go on there. This woman that I mentioned who said, who knew, we had her stop gluten-containing products, wheat and other grains that have gluten in it. In her case, her symptoms were dramatically changed within a couple of weeks. I can think of many other cases. I was going to use one that came to mind as I was driving over here to tape the show with you, but you just mentioned asthma. And I can remember within a year, a young lady, she was probably 10 or 11 years old, who's been asthmatic all of her life with the inhalers and the puffers and so on. And within maybe 3 months of taking dairy products out of her diet, the asthma was gone. Now, there were some other things that we tweaked as well, but the dairy products in that case were was a major part of the reversal of the problem. So there's many, many ways in which we can react to foods. It's not just a single thing. So if I may, I'll just go on with that. I mean,
Yes, because there's
well,
more.
the first
Have some questions about that. Go ahead.
The first and the most obvious one that many people know about and probably have experience with are allergies. I mean, many people will know someone who has, well, the one that's running rampant in our culture right now is peanuts. You know, the peanut allergies everywhere. But there are also, people can be allergic to strawberries or apples or bananas or milk or whatever. And that's your typical allergy that involves the immune system and an immune reaction, where an immune globulin or an antibody is reacting against the food which the body sees as a threat for some reason or another. Now, often that's because the body's been overexposed to that particular thing, just like a bee sting, right? You can have a bee sting which then sensitizes you to the bee venom, and so the next time around the immune system can react. That's kind of the first level. That's the typical allergy. That's where somebody has, you know, like a swollen, well, I'll get away from the bee sting. Let's talk with foods. If somebody's reacting to a food, they might have, like, you know, tingling around their mouth, or they might have some swelling in their fingers or something, or swelling around their, you know, around the mouth, or they feel a little itchy, or, you know, develop hives or something like that. You can also have a very severe allergy to foods. It results in anaphylactic shock and even death sometimes because the airway closes.
So one of them is the difference between an allergy and a sensitivity. Like, I'm allergic, or not, let's say I think it's sensitive to wheat. When I eat wheat, I get all stuffy and puffy and tired.
Right.
Okay? Even cranky. When I eat soy, it's worse. My head gets like, as if it's stuffed. It's like, I feel like I'm,
Right.
you know, so what would that be? That would be a sensitivity or an allergy?
It may depend on
An itchy.
how
Bumps.
long it takes for, clinically it's hard to tell without testing. So the answer to your question is, what's a hypersensitivity? Well, an allergy is a type of hypersensitivity. It's what's known as an immediate hypersensitivity reaction for the obvious reason. The exposure results in symptoms within seconds up to a few hours.
Right. Yeah.
But then you can also have an immune reaction with a different group or a different family of antibodies, in which case you have a delayed hypersensitivity reaction.
Yeah.
And typically a delayed hypersensitivity comes on, or I should say the symptoms develop within a couple of hours, up to a couple of days. But the difference is not really in the time in which it takes, or for which it takes the symptoms to come on, but it is the antibody that's involved. So you've got antibodies all over your body in different places. You've got them on cell walls, you've got them in the bloodstream, running around in the bloodstream. And in the bloodstream there are two families of antibodies. One is, they go by letters. So you have immunoglobulin E and immunoglobulin G. I don't know where those come from, if they're named for somebody who discovered them
Mr.
or where.
Globulin.
Yeah. But anyway, you have immunoglobulin, which is the technical name for an antibody, which you'll see abbreviated capital I, small g. So you can have IgE and you can have IgG. IgE is a small antibody and it reacts very quickly. So an IgE mediated hypersensitivity reaction is an allergy by definition. An IgG mediated hypersensitivity reaction is an IgG mediated hypersensitivity reaction. It's sometimes called food allergy, delayed reaction, hidden reaction, occult allergy, or something like that. But it's not truly an allergy. It's a delayed hypersensitivity reaction.
Yeah.
And the difference again there is in the timing, in terms of clinical expression. The IgE symptoms expresses itself again from seconds to hours. So for example, you eat something and suddenly your mouth is tingling, versus you eat something and you're driving home from the restaurant and then you go, uh-oh, I'm getting, uh-oh.
Right, yeah, I've had that.
So those are still IgE,
crap, yeah.
right?
Does it depend on the system that it takes? Because I've even learned in paramedic school that you can get stung by a bee and not have a reaction for up to 24 hours too.
Right.
So it's how their system flows, or
Right.
That's
Now on the IgG side, the symptoms can take hours to days. So an example of that would be, I remember years ago, a young woman who had a severe migraine every Tuesday morning at exactly the same time. She said she could set her watch by it.
wow.
And she had seen allergists and neurologists and of course psychologists, because somebody decided that it's all in her head,
yeah.
right? And no pun intended. And we tested her for delayed hypersensitivity reactions. It turns out that she was reacting to egg yolk in a delayed reaction. And this is a really clear-cut case because this was a woman who had eggs once a week on Sunday at the same time, at exactly the same time. I say exactly because she and her husband had a standing reservation for a champagne brunch with Eggs Benedict. So same time, same restaurant, same table, same meal. And it was more or less 48 hours later that she would have that. Now that might sound outlandish, and I can imagine people thinking, well, how do you know? Well, when she stopped having eggs on Sunday, she stopped having headaches on Tuesday. Now there's an example too, if I can go back up. Imagine if that person had eggs sort of randomly, 2 or 3 times a week without any particular pattern, then she might very well have migraines in direct association with that, but that would also look random.
Yeah.
Right?
If you were,
and then you wouldn't know. So when you have a delayed hypersensitivity to something, it's rare that the person can put 2 and 2 together because there's so much time elapsed between the exposure. Whereas if you have an immediate hypersensitivity, you can pretty much figure it out. You eat this and this happens.
is there a way to put somebody on some type of a bland diet, non-allergenic diet for like a week or something and clear them out and then figure, or is it all in blood tests?
Well, some people will tell you that the gold standard to test this is to do what they call food avoidance, to avoid the food and see what happens.
Right.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But you know, I think that the combination of doing that along with the information that you get from a test is going to give you the best results. And I learned that early on in practice, where I would suggest to someone that their child with asthma, let's say, might have some food sensitivities. And they would say, well, no, you know, we took him off of dairy for a month and nothing happened. And then we took him off of wheat for a month and nothing happened. And then we took him off of eggs for a month and nothing changed. So he can't possibly be allergic to those things. Well, it turns out, to make the case, he's allergic to all three.
All three.
Right? So the withdrawing one food at a time doesn't assure
and
you
put
that
back,
you're
yeah.
right.
The other two.
So you wouldn't know.
And can I interject something here? Ask you a question. We're talking about delayed. Would leaky gut have anything to do with delayed
Absolutely.
symptoms?
Absolutely.
You know, and I don't know exactly what that is, but I would think it leaks through your stomach. I don't know, but
Well, let me back up for a second to put that to answer that question.
Yeah.
So you can have the immediate allergy, which is the one people are most common with, or you can have a delayed allergy.
right.
But foods can also affect you differently in that you can have an intolerance to something. And the one that most people know about is a lactose intolerance. Now there's a food, we're talking about the lactose, which is the sugar in milk products, right? Which has to do with a diminished or missing enzyme where the person cannot digest the lactose well or at all, which results usually in gastrointestinal symptoms, gas and bloating and diarrhea and so on. Or you can have a gluten intolerance known as celiac disease, right, or celiac sprue, where the person has become hypersensitive to, or the lining of the gut has become hypersensitive to gluten. So in a case like that, it results in a structural change to the lining of the gut, so the gut doesn't function quite right, and then you get malabsorption and sometimes loose stools and diarrhea. So those aren't technically allergies, they're hypersensitivities.
All right. Okay.
The other way in which foods can affect you is that different classes of foods affect the bacteria in your gut in different ways. We all have millions of, or many hundreds of species, if not gazillions of bacteria, right? And bacteria feed on something, right? And mostly what they feed on is different carbohydrates. And so depending on what you're eating, you're also feeding, if I can use that term, you're feeding the microorganisms in your gut. So that may, in some cases, preferentially, or maybe I should say it differently, that may give a certain kind of bacteria or a yeast or a fungus or some other microorganism the sort of upper hand because they're, you know, they're first at the food trough or they're being fed preferentially. Then that can cause symptoms. So example, if you have an overgrowth of yeast in your system, everybody's got yeast. We eat it, we drink it, we breathe it. So it's not a matter of having yeast in your system, but it's a matter of having an imbalance where there's more yeast than there should be. So if someone has an overgrowth of any yeast or mold or fungi or that class of microorganisms, those tend to be exacerbated by or grown by or aided by, or whatever term you want to use, carbohydrates. So somebody who has a little bit of an imbalance in their gut flora, who's eating carbohydrates, may have a severe reaction in terms of like gut bloating and gas and burping and diarrhea and so on. So you come to realize that that food doesn't sit with you very well, you know, that you get sick when you eat it. But you're not really having an allergic reaction, you're actually having a bacterial overgrowth. It's like we use yeast to ferment beer or wine or vinegar or whatever. Well, if you have too much yeast in your gut, you got a little brewery going on in there, right? Because as long as you put the right, as long as the brewery has the, or as long as the what do I call it, the mix, the microorganism, the fermentation, as long as the fermentive organisms have the right environment, you're going to have this little brewery, which, just like it makes gas to brew the beer,
Right.
it makes gas in your stomach. So then you go to this leaky gut thing, and many people have probably heard about leaky. I'm surprised how many people have heard that term. What that refers to is large molecular weight proteins leaking through the gut. Now, that probably doesn't mean much to you, but under normal circumstances, the food that you're eating is digested, broken down in the gut, and does not reach the bloodstream until it's broken down to its constituent parts. That's why I brought this along, because I find myself pulling this out of the drawer in my office all the time. Proteins are made up of a string of amino acids.
Yeah. Oh, the higher. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So if we think of each of these colors as a different amino acid, those are the building blocks of proteins. So you put amino acids together in a certain order, you have a certain protein. And so if I switch this around and I put the amino acids this way, randomly in a different way, now I have a different protein. This might be casein, the protein from milk. Okay? And I do this and I might have the protein gluten. It's similar to words. If we only have 26 letters in the alphabet, but we can put those together in an infinite number of ways to come up with an infinite number of words and an infinite number of nonsense words, right? And it's same with the amino acids. When we to stretch the analogy, what we're doing is we're spelling out different words. Well, the immune system will react to a protein, not to an amino acid. Meaning, to stretch the analogy again, the immune system has to read the word. Like think of it as a Scrabble game. If you're playing Scrabble, you can make sense out of it if you have the letters in the right order.
Right.
But if you shake up the box, all you have is a bunch of letters. So I'm stretching a little bit here, but under normal conditions, when you're digesting your food, you're shaking up the box. The proteins are being broken down to one or two and some of them get lost. But you start breaking this down to the letters or to the amino acids. When we do this, there's nothing here for the immune system to react to, because it doesn't know if that's casein or gluten or turkey or beef or whatever until it's in the right configuration. Secondly, even if you don't break this down and you have fragments left behind, incomplete proteins, they stay in the gut. Because the integrity of the gut wall, the lining of the gut wall, will not allow large proteins to cross the wall, because there's no way to do it, because the way that they get transported is individually. So leaky gut is a condition that occurs under two circumstances. One is there's incomplete digestion of the proteins. So there's these large fragments that are left. But that's not enough to cause a problem unless there's some inflammation at the lining or at the level of the gut. And what that does is that disturbs the integrity of the lining, so that now substances which ordinarily would not get across that membrane can get across. It's as if it's punching holes in the dike, right? And then that becomes a circular problem, because if the hole in the dike allows, let's just use casein, which is a milk protein as an example. If that allows casein to get through, where the immune system is now reacting, and by which I mean mostly the IgG, or the delayed reaction, that causes a low-grade inflammatory response, which further damages the gut, which allows more protein to get through, which allows for a more robust reaction, which allows for more inflammation, and there you go. So leaky gut is is where I'm going to really exaggerate now. It's like where the gut's turned into a sieve, right? It doesn't discriminate anymore.
Would it be beneficial to take like a probiotic every day to help your gut stay normal?
Yes, part of what keeps gut function normal are the good bacteria.
But can you take too much of that?
I think the jury's out on that. I always thought that you could not. But I think people are starting to do that to some degree.
Yeah, because it happened to me. I took a stronger one once to see, and for a few days it was okay, but then after that, I was like in the bathroom constantly.
Well,
so.
there may be, I'm not sure about that exactly. One thing that may be happening is you may be overwhelming the gut with too many probiotics.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I know for sure happens is we all have our own biome. You know, your gut flora and my gut flora are not the same. And the combinations are endless because there are so many flora. If you're taking a probiotic, it's a proprietary product. Every company that makes a probiotic has their own product. They have their own strains. Now, these things are actually grown by and held in probiotic banks, right? So there are proprietary strains. They all have numbers and, you know, identities and dog tags or whatever.
Yeah.
But XYZ company's probiotic is always the same bugs, right? And ABC company's probiotic is always whatever their proprietary blend is. So when you take probiotics, you're getting the same population or the same grouping of bacteria each time you take that product. So now you switch to a new product, and suddenly you're putting new strains of bacteria in your gut that your gut hasn't seen before. And you can get a reaction from that.
Oh, you can.
Yeah, it's
not
almost like
necessarily a good
it's like the
thing.
new kids on the block have to fight their way in. So that's the way I think about it.
So it's not necessarily a good thing to change up your probiotic.
No, on the contrary, I think it's a good thing to change up your probiotic all the time, so
all
you're
the
getting
time, okay.
as wide a population as possible.
Oh,
But you
okay.
have to be aware of the fact that when you're introducing a new one, you may get a little, you know,
Rumbly.
a little rumbling, a little rumbly in the tumbly, as Winnie the Pooh would say, right, or something like that. So the probiotics help to maintain the normal integrity of the gut. And in fact, sometimes just probiotics alone can make a difference in some of these hypersensitivity reactions.
A friend that I knew had irritable bowel syndrome very badly and didn't know what to do. Doctors and everything. Finally, he went to I think he went to a naturopath and he put him on probiotics. He said immediately cleared it up. No more problem. And he stays on it and he hasn't had any problem since.
Well, you know, that's really interesting because I'm convinced as a naturopathic doctor that a lot of our digestive problems, yes, what's causing all of this? One of them is antibiotics.
Oh, yeah.
You probably have talked about this before in the show. I know we've alluded to it before on Healing Outside the Box. Antibiotics kill bacteria. They kill all the bacteria in the body, including the good bacteria in the digestive system. And there you go, leaky gut, irritable bowel syndrome, food allergies, and so on as a possible consequence. And it's not I don't think we're reaching too far to say that a majority of these digestive problems are caused by our wonderful medical system, right? In the United States, we've been using antibiotics willy-nilly for every little cough, cold, and sneeze for the last century. And now here we are developing antibiotic-resistant bacteria and diseases that are harder and harder to treat, to kill the bacteria, and so on.
And aren't they also in the animals? They give animals the antibiotics, and like the milk, the dairy products, the cows, and then all the other animals that people eat and call it meat.
Right. So
that's the same thing.
You're eating, presumably, you're eating small doses of antibiotics with every, you know, with any commercial meat.
I know that's. So people who do eat that and who do take a lot of antibiotics also should take the probiotic, right? Like if you take an antibiotic, you should take it at a different time, but keep putting that into your
I've always done that.
Well, yeah. When you think about this, like, what do I say? Historically or sociologically, every civilization on the planet has some kind of a cultured, let's say, fermented food as a staple in their diet, except for us, right?
Right, except for us.
Of course, we're not a civilization in many senses of the word, but we're more, you know, we're more a collection of mongrels as opposed to, you know, what I'm talking about historically, countries that have been more or less isolated or been uniquely, what do I say, separated from others for long periods of time. So that you find that everything from yogurt to kimchi to sauerkraut to sourdough bread to, I don't know, fish sauce, shrimp paste, things like this. It seems like everyone has developed something that somehow empirically they know that they've got to have that in their diet because it has a benefit to digestion. In fact, that's what beer and wine are all about. They were historically used as digestive aids, right? Because, first of all, they're ingredients, like the hops, for example, which stimulates hydrochloric acid production in the stomach and proper digestion, but it also provides the normal bacteria.
And what is that in wine? What's in wine that does it?
The wine, of course, has the bugs, and it just has the alcohol, of course, is calming. When you relax, you digest better.
Bugs? You said the bugs?
Right, because it's fermented with yeast.
Ah,
right,
okay.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So those two things are good to have with
Well,
a meal.
so
Well, not in a.
Well, and see, that brings up another thing. The way the human nervous system works is you have two divisions of the nervous system, the voluntary and the involuntary. The voluntary is just what it sounds like. I can sit here and wave my hands, which I shouldn't be doing on the air, turn my head, talk to you, get up and walk around, have a drink of water. That's a voluntary, obviously. The involuntary is just what it sounds like. Your heartbeat, your respirations, elimination, digestion, things you don't have to think about. Within the involuntary or the autonomic nervous system, think of it as automatic, but autonomic nervous system, then there's two divisions in there. One is the sympathetic and the other is called the parasympathetic. Sympathetic is fight or flight. That's the stress reaction.
That's a sympathetic nervous system. That's what it is, fight or flight.
So that's part of your autonomic nervous system. And the opposing part of that is the parasympathetic, which is, for lack of a better term, the sort of vegetative activities where you don't have to think about it, but it's when you're relaxed, right? So the stress reaction, the fight or flight reaction, the sympathetic reaction is a reaction which, in nature anyway, it kicks in when you're threatened. So stress is a reaction to a threat, right? And it's sort of, when you're stressed out, it's a life or death situation. I like to say that the sympathetic response occurs when you're chasing your lunch.
Chasing you what?
Your lunch.
Oh.
You're a tiger chasing a zebra or whatever.
Oh,
or a
the
lion
animal
chasing
world.
a zebra.
Yeah.
You're chasing your lunch or you are lunch. It's one or the other. But you're either running after your lunch or you're running from your predator, right? Well, that's all hands on deck, right? You want visual acuity, strength, rapid heartbeat, everything you need to survive. And everything else is moot at that point. Who cares if you're digesting or not digesting? It would be a terrible time to be wasting time trying to digest your food or going to the bathroom, for that matter, right? So the way the good Lord's got that figured out is when you're in a stress reaction, you're not only ignoring your digestion, you're also turning it off. So when you're under stress, your body does not make digestive enzymes. It does not make stomach acid. It doesn't work. There's no peristalsis in the gut.
Okay, that's good to know.
So what happens then when you have someone who's having something severe like a heart attack or something like that, and they actually do have a bowel movement or something like that? Is it just an overwhelming amount of a chemical that?
It's that follows, right? So it's like as soon as that is over, then you get the release that you're
Completely
talking
the
about.
other way.
Oh,
And
so.
suddenly as it's coming back online, it just...
Oh, so that means that, because I had a gentleman having a heart attack, and before we could get him on our stretcher, he had a bowel movement right there on the,
Right.
on it. So that means
Right.
he had the heart attack, and okay.
So I bring this up for this reason. We live in a society where I don't think you could think about more stress.
I know.
I mean, you think about the finances, you
Yeah.
think about politics, you think about people worrying about health care, and on and on and on and on and on.
It's worse now than it ever was, yeah.
And so there's another roundabout way of answering your question about what's causing all this. When you're under stress, your digestive system is inhibited. It's turned off. So you're not digesting right, you're not absorbing right, therefore you're not providing the right environment for the normal bacteria. You're not breaking down your food as well as you probably could. And so all of those things that compromise the digestive system, leading to food sensitivities, to leaky gut, to allergic reactions and hypersensitivity reactions, are exacerbated by stress. So it's no problem. I mean, it's no, what's the word I want? It's no surprise that at this time in our culture we have so many digestive problems.
I was told that, now I can understand why. When you have your meals, breakfast, lunch, supper, that you should have it peacefully and quietly. You shouldn't, like I always like to read or watch TV or get on my computer when I'm eating. Wrong thing to do, because I'm watching this stuff and I'm reading all this news and I'm getting aggravated when I'm eating. Now I know why, and then I have problems after. So your meal should be taken peacefully and quietly, and if you're with someone, peaceful, quiet conversation, not anything, right? That's a wonderful thing to know. That's what happens.
And there you go back to the wisdom of other cultures. You think about the idea of dinner time as being a social time to relax and laugh and have a glass of wine and relax, right? And maybe have some music and maybe a little dancing or something, or at least kicking back and relaxing, because that's the way to digest. I mean, that may not be why they do it, but somehow, what do I say, empirically, they figured that out.
Well, way back when we didn't have any of those things, it would be that way, right? We would sit quietly and do that.
I have two examples of that. Years ago, when I was a young man, I worked with somebody in a fairly high-stress situation, and this gentleman and I would often go out to lunch, often like to a salad bar or something like that, where you can go through a line, like a buffet line, and prepare your own meal. And I would be either eating on the run, or we'd get to the end of the line, and there'd be tables where you could stand, and I'd eat, and he wouldn't eat. He wouldn't eat anything, and I would say, "What's the matter?" He goes, "I can't eat I can't eat when I'm standing." And I never asked him why. That just happened over and over. And then when I got to know the guy well enough, I said one time, "I got to ask you a question. I don't understand this thing. Why can't you eat when you stand?" He said, "Well, it's not that I can't eat when I stand. It's because I figure if I don't have enough time to sit down and relax, enough to digest the meal, I have no business eating it. I have no business eating it on the run, or in my car, or standing at a table, or in the middle of a conversation."
Well, that's what 80% of us do.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
I think one of the most important things you taught me, because I came to see Dr. Sensenig when I had a cough for
He's
like
our doctor,
6
ladies
months.
and gentlemen.
Yeah, he's our doctor. But 6 months of coughing, and my regular doctor putting me on antibiotics after antibiotics after inhalers, nothing was changing, and I was frustrated. And I went to see Dr. Sensenig, and of course found out I had a lot of food allergies. But what you taught me about acid indigestion and taking acid inhibitors and all that, I think people need to know that, because that was really important.
Oh yeah, we should definitely talk about that.
I haven't touched Zantac since. I haven't had to since we changed everything.
I definitely want to talk about that.
Yeah,
one.
we
But
have
I want
to
to
talk
give
about that.
I want to give you another quick anecdote about relaxing. I lived in Korea for a while, thanks to Uncle Sam.
Korea.
And one of the things that surprised me is you go into a restaurant, and the men, before they sit down, if they're dressed like I am, you take off your jacket and your tie and your shirt, and you hang it on the back of your chair, and sit there in your undershirt, right?
Really?
And of course, at first, when I first saw that, I'm like, this is a little weird, right? But it's the same phenomenon, right? It's
To
like, how do you
relax.
relax when you're wearing a coat and tie? You want to enjoy your dinner. You want to, like, it's like letting your hair down or putting your pajamas on or something, right? So
That's
you enjoy
interesting.
your dinner in your T-shirt. And I guess it also keeps you from messing up your tie, too. But oh, boy, stomach acid. Well, what I like to tell patients, and what I probably told you, is You have acid in your stomach. It's supposed to be there. The good Lord put it there for a reason. And the reason is it helps you to digest your food. Well, not directly, but the acid environment, which is created by the secretion of hydrochloric acid, which is a very, very strong acid, by the way. If you put hydrochloric acid on this table here, it would eat its way right through to the floor, and rather quickly. It's one of the strongest acids we know.
Wow.
And it's in your stomach. But what happens is, it's not there all the time. It's there only when you need it. So when you're hungry, or when you start eating, when you start thinking about eating, when you look at the food, when you walk in the restaurant, you think about ordering, you start secreting a little bit of acid. And as this process goes on, as you now smell the food and taste it and have other stimuli, you secrete even more acid. And then by the time the food is going down your esophagus and landing in your stomach, the acid secretion's on full tilt, right? So the acid bath in which this food finds itself, which is supposedly all torn up and broken down because you chewed it properly, the acid environment is what allows the protein digesting enzymes to be activated. The enzymes that break down protein are in your stomach, but they're in an inactive form until there's enough acid for them to change. And then that starts the whole cascade of the digestive process. The food in the stomach, when it's thoroughly digested and mixed in the protein enzymes, is still very acidic. And as that moves into your small intestine, your duodenum, that's the signal for your pancreas to let go of the rest of the digestive enzymes. So the acid is very important to stimulating proper digestion and maintaining the normal environment in the gut to allow for the support and the growth of the good bacteria. So yeast and mold and fungi, pathogens, the bad guys can't live in an acid medium, right? But the good bacteria can. In fact, that's their name, acidophilus, which is Greek for likes acid.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Right? Or is it Latin?
And I was constantly taking Zantac every day.
Right. So when you take Zantac or any of these other things that inhibit your acid, you're winning the battle, but you're losing the war. Because what you're doing now is you're effectively shutting down your digestive process. You're changing the environment in the gut so that the, let's just generalize here, the bad bacteria can proliferate and the good guys can't thrive, right? Which in turn then, of course, affects your absorption, your digestion, sets you up for the food allergies that we're talking about because you have to break down the proteins. But then more than that, it affects your absorption of everything else. That's why when you read the label on these acid inhibitors, one of the major side effects is osteoporosis. Right? The connection there is that it blocks your absorption so effectively. Maybe I should put it in terms that the public is being told by their doctor, it's inhibiting your acid. But it's inhibiting your acid so effectively that you can't absorb your minerals, which are highly dependent on the pH in the gut.
All right, so people take that. Let's make a whole thing here. People take that when they get heartburn. All right? We all know what heartburn is. So you take that, it stops it. So if
it stops the symptoms.
It's the symptoms, right.
That's what he taught me. It stops the symptoms.
So if you have heartburn, that's not what you should reach for, right?
No.
There's other things. Okay. Which you could...
A nice walk, a glass of wine, or some more hydrochloric acid.
Some more. Okay.
Or stop eating.
Which you can buy in a pill.
In my case, I would stop eating the things that I was allergic to that we found out.
Now, how can more hydrochloric acid help? Well, because heartburn is not from stomach acid.
Okay.
It's from acid, all right, but it's not from stomach acid.
What's it from?
It's from the lack of stomach acid, which allows the food in your stomach to, in its undigested form, to begin to ferment.
Ferment.
Because there's bacteria in there.
That's
and
it.
I try to teach people that.
And fermentation causes acid or results in acid.
Right.
And the proof of that is this. Conventional wisdom and basic physiology tells us what I just said. You start to secrete hydrochloric acid as soon as the stimulus of the food is in your environment, and as soon as you eat that food. So the acid level in your stomach reaches its highest point when the food reaches your stomach. Because the body's an intelligent, adaptive organism that knows what it's doing. The acid is in there when the food is in there, right? Not 3 hours later. So if the heartburn was being caused by your stomach acid, it would be after you have a couple of bites of the burger, because that's when the acid reaches its peak, right?
But it doesn't
But
happen
that's
then.
not what happens when people get
No.
heartburn. They get heartburn a half an hour later,
Yes.
or in the middle of the night.
Right.
Well, that's not the stomach acid doing that. The stomach acid's gone or not present
Right.
by then. And so using digestive enzymes that have a little bit of hydrochloric acid in them, and in some cases by actually taking hydrochloric acid, actually something called betaine hydrochloride, by increasing the acid so that the digestive process can work properly, you can get rid of the heartburn. Now, if there are people listening to this, do not do that on your own without the guidance of somebody who knows what they're talking
right,
about.
exactly. Oh,
Because
definitely.
there's another part to this that we didn't mention, and that's this. We probably had this conversation, which goes like this. You probably never asked yourself this question, but how is it that you can digest a cow, right? A piece of steak. That your stomach acid and your digestive enzymes are strong enough for you to digest a cow, and you don't digest yourself.
Good question. That's
How
right.
come a lion can eat a zebra and eat the whole darn thing, including the parts that we wouldn't normally eat, but the lion doesn't digest itself? And you both know that I grew up in Pennsylvania Dutch country, where a delicacy is a pig stomach, right? And as a little kid, I remember thinking this same thing that we're talking about. How come I can sit here at the table and eat the stomach of another mammal and digest that, and I don't digest my own stomach?
It's a good question.
And part of the answer is because the food in your stomach, the acid in your stomach, and the food in your stomach never touches your stomach. The stomach protects itself with a very thick layer of mucus that's known by a highly technical name called the mucus shield. Right?
Oh, well, that
Very
is.
technical.
So the mucus shield is lining the inside of the stomach lining, and so this mess of food and acid and enzymes is getting all churned up and mixed up by the stomach, but it never touches the stomach. So when you have an ulcer, which some people think of as heartburn, is an ulcer, it's not because of the presence of the acid, it's because of the absence of the protective shield.
The mucus.
Now, why would the shield be down? You know, shields up, shields down. Why
Right.
would the shield be down? Remember that when you're under stress, you're inhibiting your digestive function. So your stomach can't shield itself. It can't make the shield that protects you from the acid that would normally be there. So what we do for heartburn, in addition to improving, normalizing, correcting stomach acid secretion, before we do that, and before we take the hydrochloric acid or ask you to take the hydrochloric acid, we want to make sure that the shields are up. You know, like on Star Trek, shields up.
Right.
You know, you get the stomach shield, you get the mucus shield back in place first, so the stomach can coat itself. Now, that might sound stupid, but that's what certain drugs are all about. You know, like Zantac, like Pepto-Bismol, and so on. They're to coat the stomach. So the stomach normally coats itself. So the question a naturopathic doctor should always be asking, and everybody else should be asking if they're trying to figure these things out, is why is that happening? You know, why do you have to take the Pepto-Bismol? Why do you have to coat your stomach when it already has its own coating? So, and so maybe this comment, you asked me before we began the show this evening if I had read the email from you about the PPIs. not long ago, if you had an upset stomach, you would drink a little seltzer water, or maybe take some Bromo-Seltzer or Alka-Seltzer. Every soda fountain in every drugstore in America had a soda fountain.
Right.
But it wasn't to dispense soda pop or soft drinks or whatever people call them now. It was to dispense soda water. That's why they're called a soda fountain. What is soda? Bicarbonate of soda. You go into the drugstore and you get a shot of
That's right. I remember.
soda water.
Yeah, my parents
Right?
said something about that. Yeah.
That's why every drugstore, see, I guess only us baby boomers know about this. That's why every drugstore in America had a soda fountain, right?
I worked one.
And then a druggist, I mean, what's the famous story about Coca-Cola? The druggist in Atlanta who put a little bit of cocaine and cola nut and sugar in there to flavor it and give it a little kick, and that's the beginning of soft drinks or the beginning of sodas. But that started as a way to quench the stomach acid, to buffer the acid. But there's no money in buffering the acid with the soda fountain, so the drug companies come up with the Bromo-Seltzer and the Alka-Seltzer. And then there's that whole period that us old folks remember through the 50s and the 60s where people were taking those things to buffer the acid. Then we got to the point where we started with things like Rolaids, which was a stronger buffer. But there's no money in that either. So then the drug companies come up with what they come up with more and more aggressive ways to now stop you from producing the acid in the first place. The consequences of that are phenomenal. And the side effects are...
My doctor put me on the proton pump inhibitor medicine once, and I had such stomach pain from one pill. I never took it again. It was terrible.
Well, before that, they went from the buffer to what they call the H2 blockers, because hydrochloric acid is made of hydrogen. Hydrochloric acid is hydrogen and chloride. So you have to have a hydrogen molecule and a chlorine molecule to make hydrochloric acid. So an H2 blocker blocks the stomach from pumping out the hydrogen. So now you can't make the acid.
Just the thought of that.
But that's not strong enough. So then you go to the PPIs or the...
You need to start with correcting your diet at the beginning, I mean, right?
I have a question to ask you. Yeah, you know, I think we're going to have this show at part 2 because there's so much more that you can cover, and we're not going to have time for it all.
Yeah, you know, driving over here, I'm thinking, how are we going to fill the hour?
I know. Well, we're going to have to come back and part 2 of this, okay?
Right.
We'll definitely do that. But let me ask you this right now before we close, because I think people would be very interested. Many people, they eat healthy food, okay, but they still deal with weight gain, inflammation, pain, acne, autoimmune disease, all these problems, even though they eat healthy, so-called healthy food. So why is that?
Well,
why do you think?
I think there's a lot of potential reasons, but one of them comes down to the kinds of things we're talking about tonight. Often when you correct the digestion, when your digestion is robust as it can be, you're avoiding this problem because you're breaking down the food molecules to the constituent amino acids rather than these remaining parts that then lead to leaky gut, inflammation, allergic reactions, hypersensitivity reactions, and so on. Just like the anecdote I started with at the beginning, the woman with rheumatoid arthritis. I mean, think about that for a second. She's in this area, so she was able to go to a world-famous hospital around here and be diagnosed with by a rheumatologist with rheumatoid arthritis based on her symptoms. There was no positive blood work that showed anything, and there were no x-rays that showed anything. So there was no arthritis on x-rays. She was told she'd have to be on methotrexate for the rest of her life, which is a drug that inhibits the immune system, right? Because it's an autoimmune disease.
My stepmom was on that.
Yeah,
We took her off of wheat because she was because I could show objectively. I wasn't guessing. We could show objectively that she was reacting to wheat, and so all those things that you just mentioned—the inflammation, the pain, and she was gaining weight, by the way. She was swelling in her ankles. Things that classically would have been diagnosed as something else was nothing more, or I shouldn't say nothing more. There's some other minor parts to this, but it was mostly a reaction to a food.
And I tried to have that conversation with my stepmom because she's on methotrexate, and I said, "You're eating stuff it's not. You got to find out what your food allergies are. You're taking this stuff, and it's gonna kill you, and worse than the food allergies." She won't listen. It's not that. It's not that. It's not that.
Well, there's another part. This is probably the part two part. Is what's in the food,
Now,
or what's not in the food? That's another question.
on that note, I like to always suggest a book or for people to be more informed. Digestion is a very important part of life, and a really good book that I read was called Wheat Belly by William Davis. Gives you a lot of information out there about how our diets are and what wheat is doing, and gluten and GMOs is doing to our bodies and causing a lot of medical problems. So if you get a chance, pick that book up. It's also in audio form, so you can listen to it in your car. Wheat Belly by William Davis.
I have so many more questions.
Yes.
And I'm hearing from the control room that it's time to close, though our clock doesn't say that, but they're saying that it is. So we're going to have to give the contact information, but we're going to have you back as soon as your schedule clears for another show.
We'll do part two.
Part two of this, because this is so important. Proper
help a lot of
digestion is
people.
important to every part of your body, everything that happens to you, even your well-being, your personality, everything can make you angry. Wrong foods can do a lot of things. So I want to talk all about
Depression
that.
too,
Absolutely.
right?
And depression.
Didn't you tell me depression? I think you told
Yeah.
me that.
Yeah,
bad
but if
food
I
can-
have 15 seconds, I had a child with severe ADHD, right? But this kid was also oppositional and violent, and he would get in trouble in school all the time. We in this case, we took him off of after testing, taken off of dairy products. Everything changed.
Yeah. See?
No,
That's what I mean.
no
That gives
medication.
me
This is so
goosebumps.
important. So
Yeah.
we've
Gives me
got to.
goosebumps.
Yeah.
We want to explain it all out. So okay, folks, you stay tuned for another show like that.
We'll do part two
Yep,
on this
with Dr.
more
Sensenig.
information.
All right, then we'll give the contact information now. To get in touch with Dr. Sensenig, it's www.naturalhealthconnecticut.com. That's the website. His phone number is 203-230-2200, and that's in Hamden, Connecticut. To get in touch with for us, Healing Outside the Box, I'm Rosemary Lachance. My phone number is 203-627-7966. The email is whitebuffalo@comcast.net, and my website is www.rosemarylachance.com.
And for me, Dina Scungio, you can email me at freewind1@comcast.net, and you can also find me on Facebook under D Scungio and Twitter as well.
It's good that you have that memorized because it's gone.
That's okay. I
Doctor.
memorized it well.
Thank you
Thank you.
so much.
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you, Dr.
And
Sensenig.
thank
We'll
you.
be looking forward to having you on again very soon, okay? Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Thank
and
you.
Good night.
If you're having any issues, please go see Dr. Sensenig. He saved my life.
Good night.
Fill your thirst beside the river. Wash the journey from your hand. Feel the comfort flow inside you. Come this far, you understand.